I was probably 12 years old. It was late and everyone in my house was asleep. All the lights were out except for the TV in my room that was playing Adult Swim. I remember nervously glancing down the dark hallway that faced my room. Halfway down that hallway, there was a small nightlight that flickered near the floor. It was meant to simulate the flickering of a candle, I think, but it had a habit of drawing my attention towards it. The nightlight did weird things with the shadows and the carpet, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then my attention was pulled back to the TV when an ominous cover of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star started playing. The Ishimura came into view, briefly backlit by the warm oranges of ages 7. Then we entered the ship, and after each bloody transition the music grew more sinister. Bodies, blood, fire, and then, with a musical growl, I was shown the creatures that haunted the halls as they ripped Isaac apart. And then it was over, and my attention again fell to that flickering light in my hallway. I slept with the door shut that night, completely bewildered and confused by what I had witnessed. But above all else, I was exhilarated. Dead Space was hugely impactful, and a massive amount of supporting media was created around the success of the first game. I ate it up, all of it. I had already been a fan of sci-fi horror, and to me I was given everything I could want in order to sink my teeth into the world that was expertly crafted by EA Redwood Shores, later known as Visceral Games. I owe my obsession with the Alien franchise at the time to a lot of my interest with this game, and I think Visceral Games does as well, and I appreciate that they wear their inspirations unabashedly on their sleeve. Films like Event Horizon, Alien and Aliens, and John Carpenter's The Thing are clearly the DNA of this series. On a gameplay level, the first Dead Space is very Resident Evil 4. The developers even said so themselves, and part of me wonders what the original System Shocky Dead Space would have been like. Probably pretty awesome. But I wouldn't change a single thing about the first Dead Space if I was given the chance, except for maybe the changes made in the remake, which I do believe were mostly positive and done so in good faith. On a world design level, Dead Space is very Alien, and on a flavor of horror level, it's like if Aliens and The Thing had a love child while Event Horizon watched in the corner, and I'm all here for it. While not entirely unique, I believe where Dead Space separates itself from its inspirations is in certain elements like the marker, unitology, and the nature of the necromorphs themselves. The artists of Visceral Games nailed everything. It's very rare for a studio to get every aspect of their world's design correct, but I believe they absolutely did. It's both high concept while being grounded and grimy, it's bloody and oppressive while also being hopeful and triumphant, it's dark and dismal, yet beautiful. Design motifs, especially in interactive media like video games, are crucial. They can be used primarily to train the player on what they can and cannot or should and should not do mechanically, such as the color of a door's holographic display being blue or orange to indicate whether or not it can be interacted with, or blue then yellow then red to indicate that Isaac is not doing well. Design motifs are also used as a tool for generating both overt and subliminal horror. Dead Space's designs are meant to signal fear, foreboding, and loneliness, isolation. Ultimately, as players, we feel watched and threatened at all times. There is not a single place on the ship, outside of a technical level of truth in some areas, where we feel completely safe. Even before the necromorphs are revealed to us, we know that something has gone wrong, more wrong than a simple busted relay. While it's been said before, I think it worth mentioning here that the Ishimura itself is just as much an antagonist as the necromorphs and the marker. The visual motif of bones or being like a dead body is ubiquitous. The Ishimura looks like the decomposing corpse of a giant creature. Massive, curved, buttress-like columns cover the outside of the ship like a cathedral or a chest cavity made of decayed ribs or maybe even teeth. Isaac's suit is covered in it in the form of rib-like armor plating. His iconic blue glowing visor takes on the visual appearance of ethereal glowing rib bones or even wounds from a clawed beast. Even his diegetic health bar is segmented like large vertebrae. Inside the Ishimura, things are not comfortable or inviting. Exposed machinery pounds and grinds away like the legs on some giant insect or hungry teeth gnawing away at the mineral ore the ship is designed to process. The poorly lit labyrinthian hallways funnel its denizens around like blood vessels or intestines. The tram system runs along the length of the ship like a faulty spinal cord, desperately fighting to send signals to its extremities. The religious extremists that captain the vessel operate it like the sick brain of an addict might operate their own body, seeking not in the best interest of the whole, but just doing whatever it can to satiate its lust for power and knowledge, their next fix, so to speak. Then we discover this brain has brought something aboard, something it cannot control despite the best efforts of the brain, something malignant, a kind of conscious cancer, immediately noticeable yet ultimately ignored, starting in the extremities of the vessel and the minds of its denizens and quickly spreading throughout and consuming everything in its path. When I think of the Ishimura, the term hell ship, ghost ship, or even possession come to mind. Eerie voices echo through the halls. Hallucinations and apparitions come from dark, smoky hallways. Is this the marker infecting our minds, or is the marker infecting the Ishimura as well? Throughout the game, we spend most of our time fixing the ship. This is a valid point of narrative criticism, but I think it overplayed and slightly reductive. Isaac is an engineer, and so he will spend the majority of the plot running around trying to get this broken, decrepit beast working again. He's good at doing that. While go here and fix this, I admit, does get dry narratively. It wasn't until the second game came out that I really noticed it. In the first game, I didn't question it because I too wanted Isaac to escape with all of his limbs. One thing this does is force the player to not only go from point A to point B, but to also interact with the ship on a level deeper than opening doors. At times it can feel as though the ship itself is working against us. The level on the engineering deck while on the surface is basically troubleshooting the engine, discovering it needs gas and then fixing it. And the Ishimura is a body analogy that we have working here, we're restarting the heart. In the mission on the bridge, we're getting the brain and immune system working again. On the mining deck, we're clearing the bowels of the ship. In hydroponics, we're attempting to remove a malignant growth. You get the idea. We are subliminally performing an autopsy on the Ishimura throughout the entire game. Every interaction with the ship is an omen of death and violence. Isaac is trapped in the possessed, cancerous body of an undead alien beast. When we use the term body horror, we most likely consider it a cinematic or narrative tool used to convey stakes or to elicit disgust and shock. Body horror is usually direct and unabashed. It's grotesque and meant to make the viewer or player uncomfortable. I, however, think body horror is most effective when used as a lens to amplify the subliminal or to bolster the overall theme of the work. For instance, the life cycle and subsequent birth scene in the original Alien film is shocking, to say the least. It's violent, bloody, and reveals the truth of how dire the circumstances are for the crew of the Nostromo. We don't want that to happen to us. What else is that thing capable of? It's also subliminally sexual in nature. The whole subtext of the alien is sexual in nature and is reflected in the creature's physical design. On the surface, we don't want to be killed. Subliminally, we don't want to be, well, you get the picture. When we examine the necromorphs with a similar scrutiny for the subliminal, at first things seem very superficial. The horror is derived from seeing them. They're repulsive, wrong. The human form is not meant to look that way. Then we see what they do, how they act, and we think, I don't want that thing to get me. As our understanding of their basic functions deepens, this then becomes, I don't want to become one of them. But Dead Space does something a bit more unique with that zombie/reanimation aspect. By attaching the source of the transformation to a cosmic entity with unknown intentions, rather than an unthinking virus, a very oppressive amount of existentialism enters the mind. A question that has haunted humans since the beginning of our advanced level of consciousness has effectively been answered. In the vacuum of Dead Space, the necromorphs are a form of life after death. Unitology is technically right. The truth is just terrifying. We are drawn into the same fatal question that is ubiquitous with cosmic horror. What is it? Will I be aware when I transform? Unable to move or control myself? Will I feel it? Is that all there is out there? Is this the only eternity left for us? To become one with the marker via flesh and blood and violent death? These questions enter our minds on a level deeper than forward-facing deliberate thought. These questions pulse around in the deep, dark subtext of our brains as we play, prodding, pushing, much like the signal of the marker itself and its subsequent infection. The opening of Dead Space is remarkable. We as players are immediately shown what these things are capable of and how they function. Rather than a prompt on the screen coming up to say, press this button to aim and shoot, we are met first with one that says, press this button to run. We are barely given time to breathe before they are upon us. We run through a dark red hallway. Much like a bloody throat, we are being swallowed and pushed deeper into the Ishimura. Slashers bust through vents and are hot on our tail. Bladed appendages dig into our back as we just make it to the elevator. Thankfully, those elevator doors didn't seem to have any safety features when they were designed. Isaac is coated in blood, some of it his own, but most of it the remains of others. The necromorphs scream and shake and roar with anticipation. They are angry, vibrating nerve endings with teeth and tentacles and jagged scythes. They hide in the vents and the walls. Some of them lumber around, stalking, carefully hunting. Others prepare themselves for ambush, patiently waiting. A kind of patience that is centuries, if not millennia old, and always hungry. Some of them grow large in size, always looking for more bodies to add to themselves, more flesh to weaponize, more things to kill. Some of them are made from nothing but small scraps of flesh, tiny animated wounds, but still they look for victims. No living thing is safe from them. Let's start with the most recognizable, and in my opinion, most successful design of the necromorphs. The slasher evokes what the creature used to be more than the other enemies in the game. It stands upright, has 2 legs, a head, and 4 arms. But if we were to black out the details of the creature and just look at its silhouette, it's an unmistakably alien design. Do the markers, similar to The Thing, use already existing body plans of previous organisms they've consumed? Or are the necromorphs as we see them in the first game specifically designed for humanity? I'm sure there's a canon answer to this, but I prefer the question to remain unknown, as it is in the original game. I think it plays into the eldritch and cosmic nature of the markers better, but we can examine the creature's designs and make our own interpretation. To me at least, I can't help but see a praying mantis-like creature when examining the silhouette and the layout of the slasher. It even has those 2 small arms that protrude from its stomach to make a total number of appendages 6. The way they walk around, twitching, testing their extremities, and almost feeling them out reminds me of how insects will clean their extremities or work their mandibles when waiting patiently for something to latch themselves onto. The slasher's massive bladed hands are used to snare and immobilize its prey, and when they grab Isaac, much like a mantis, they immediately start gnawing at his neck and head region. Additionally, the advanced forms of the slasher and other necromorphs over time turn dark. Their flesh hardens into a blackish-green carapace the longer they remain under the marker's influence. Could this be the necromorphs approaching a closer approximation of what the body plan for the creatures was originally taken from? They look more removed from the human body. They become more bug-like, more alien. If we take into account the religious subtext of Dead Space, the idea of cosmic horror, we can begin to see an alternative hypothesis. A man-sized praying mantis is unsettling, but what makes the necromorphs terrifying is that twisted take on life after death noted earlier. The connection to the marker. This theme is baked into every aspect of the necromorph design. It is their motif. Praying mantises are named such because of the way they hold their massive bladed arms, evoking a person praying. Slashers in most of their forms have blades protruding from their palms in a twisted take on stigmata. The infector necromorph's method of infection is to drive a spiked proboscis through the forehead. This is often where Catholics will mark themselves for Lent. Other cultures often use the spot in the center of the forehead for religious or meditative purposes as well, the third eye being opened by force, so to speak, allowing the truth to be shown, the marker's truth. The leaper-type necromorphs attack much like a scorpion or other ambush predator. And even more similar to insects, they climb on walls and ceilings, and they have prehensile mandibles that sprout from their once human jaws. Their massive bladed tail is composed of their recombined lower halves. If lain prostrate, one can say it evokes depictions of crucifixion. The feet nailed together, the arms spread wide. The lurkers, once human infants, now sprout 3 barbed tentacles capable of firing projectiles, 3 potentially being a mocking of the Holy Trinity. However, this could be a stretch because the number of something in a video game being 3 is extremely common. The Leviathan in chapter 6 is named after the beast from the Bible. In the Bible, this beast is used both as a means to describe God's power of creation and also as a symbol of chaos, used to represent or embody the enemies of God and the end of creation, like in Revelation. In the Bible, this creature is multi-headed and heralds the end of days, which also happens to be the title of chapter 10 in the game. And in Dead Space, the Leviathan is depicted as a massive flesh amalgam. It's a 10 kiloton mass of flesh that is really only describable as rampant growth that has multiple tentacles and is poisoning the air of the Ishimura, effectively dooming any survivors. I concede that not all forms of the necromorph scourge have such direct visual religious design elements, but it is worth noting that the most common shapes we will be interacting with throughout the game, the default forms, do. It leads one to wonder how much of the human subconscious, the collective mortal fears of us as a species, inform the way the marker changes us. Is it simply relying on efficiency? Does it have a taxonomy of life forms similar to the Thing? Or is this psychological torture based around its understanding of the human mind? Both could be true, probably, but it wouldn't be a cosmic or eldritch horror if we completely understood it. I tend to favor the idea that the marker essentially scanned us as an organism and found unique and deeply personal ways to craft a hell specifically for humanity. I believe the subliminal implications make this conclusion more evident as well. Let's take a moment to examine the marker. It is the center of the Dead Space universe. I've mentioned it here and there and touched on it being our eldritch component of the cosmic horror space opera that is this franchise, but I'd like to give it the same examination we've given everything else. In the original Dead Space, the marker is a glowing red and black pulsing monolith that is shaped similarly to a DNA double helix. If we examine its design components, we can also tell that it is segmented and textured. It evokes a ram's horn or an antelope's horn in many ways. In other ways, it also resembles undersea creatures like the grabbing arms of a squid, or perhaps even intertwined snakes or worms. It can also be interpreted as a drill bit. This not only evokes the nature of humanity in the world of Dead Space, but also tells us what it is going to do: drill into our minds, or stab, or more generally to wound us. The alien script is the cherry on top of the "don't touch this thing, get away from it" sundae that is the marker, and yet we are drawn to it. The alien symbols on the thing are a key to an alien language, and this language is a code for creation, a code that insidiously wants intelligent life to consume it. This premise, once understood, is terrifying. I fully believe that the markers want beings to regard it as a holy artifact, and that this is all but confirmed in later entries in the series. The idea that your religion, something intended to be benevolent, to ease the suffering of acknowledging that we are mortal, planned for you to worship it, and secretly unleashes a kind of living hell specifically designed for us, is terrifying, and the pinnacle of eldritch cosmic horror. In the world of sci-fi alien artifacts, I believe 3 are perfect: the derelict vessel in Alien, the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the marker in Dead Space. In each instance, humanity is confronted with something it cannot comprehend, and in each instance, the thing that simply is too much for us to handle. Dead Space has a later revealed twist where we discover the markers are very much intentional and very much hostile directly towards us. Much like Alien in 2001, humans have a history with the markers that is withheld from the protagonists. An ancient history embroiled in government conspiracy and philosophies about existence. A plan was laid out, and we followed its will, regardless of how hard we tried our best to defy it. That inevitability is the key to the type of horror Dead Space creates. I spoke a lot about symbolisms and subliminal themes being shown in visual motifs, and I think that most of the great successes in this genre are great successes because of this key ingredient. Dead Space does something unique by blending the supernatural, more traditional devils and demons and ghosts design with the science fiction, aliens, microorganisms, and incomprehensible highbrow Lovecraftian designs. And the artists were able to essentially take the best elements of both genres and blend them together, both thematically and visually. I could go on and on about this and really get my ramble on, but I don't think I need to. The 2023 remake is truly a love letter to the franchise, but the original is still incredible and in a few ways a better experience, and in some other ways a product of its time. I think the necromorphs in the original game are more threatening and more tense to fight. Their designs are iconic, but this isn't necessarily why I think this. The designs in the remake are incredible in their own right, and I love how imposing they've made our beloved necromorphs from the original. They're taller and more high definition, and when they've been damaged, the body horror escalates tenfold. One of my favorite moments in the remake is using the force gun to skin a room full of slashers and blast them to the ground, then watch them all rise up, these frail, demonic-looking skeletons, sharply gargling and hissing because that's the only sound their bodies can make after being blasted away by the thing. Or watching a firewall from the flamethrower encapsulate a group of them, and watching their hellish flame dance as they're slowly burnt to a crisp. That's awesome, but in the original Dead Space, the necromorphs behave more desperately. They run at Isaac and jump and scream and dodge his shots. They cannot wait to get to you. I felt more tension from the behavior of the enemies in the first game, and I believe their animations in general are more evocative and scary than in the remake. Both are incredible, but the original elevates my blood pressure slightly more when there are enemies on the screen. On the other hand, I believe the remake does a far better job of making the Ishimura a more fleshed out and real space. The dark and quiet, lonely moments in the remake where Isaac is exploring the ship are far more ominous than in the original. This is partly due to the graphical and lighting improvements, but also because of the director AI that will throw encounters at you while you explore the ship, and when you least expect it. I won't get into the weeds about that, but I could make a whole video detailing the remake and the original if that's something y'all are interested in. In essence, Dead Space is an incredible game, an incredible story, and an incredible work of art. I cherish the artists and writers and programmers who brought this thing to life, and because of the remake, I'll always have a modern Dead Space game to return to. I won't acknowledge the absolute deja vu that EA hit us with after the remake was released in regards to future plans for the franchise, as I'm trying to end this video off on a positive note. If you haven't played it, you should. If you haven't returned in a while, do so. Keep some of the ideas about theme and motif we've talked about in your mind while you do play, and let me know your own opinions on the game. Maybe some details I missed and what you thought of this video as well. I've laid a couple not-so-hidden hints about the topic I'll be covering in the next video, and if you're interested, please give me a follow and a like and maybe a suggestion for other topics as well, be it games, movies, TV, etc. Thanks for watching and have a good one.